Hello and welcome to the first lecture in the series of two lectures on Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. This particular novel has been written by the American writer Mark Twain, and my name is Vikas Panchakshari, and I teach at Government PG College, Mimitara. So, in this presentation, we are going to study Mark Twain as a writer, Huckleberry Finn, the novel's significance, summary of the novel, and historical context of Huckleberry Finn. As you all know, Mark Twain, whose real name was Samuel Langhorne Clemens, was an American writer, humorist, entrepreneur, publisher, and lecturer. He was lauded as the greatest humorist the United States has produced, and William Faulkner called him the father of American literature. American author Mark Twain wrote stories of youthful adventures. His stories are treasured by readers around the world. He created Tom Sawyer, Huckleberry Finn, and other memorable characters. Twain's real name was Samuel Langhorne Clemens. He was born on November the 30th, 1835, in the small town of Florida, Missouri. When he was 4 years old, he moved with his family to Hannibal, Missouri, on the Mississippi River. In 1847, Samuel's father died. From then on, Samuel had to help support the family. At the age of 13, he started working with a local printer. In the late 1850s and early 1860s, he piloted steamboats on the Mississippi. In the 1860s, he started writing under the name Mark Twain. In 1865, he published a humorous story called The Celebrated Jumping Frog of Calaveras County, and this story made him famous. In the 1870s, Twain settled with his family in Hartford, Connecticut, where he wrote his most famous books. He used his experiences growing up on the Mississippi River to write many of his stories. His novel, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, which was published in 1876, is a story about a boy and his friends in a small river town. The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn tells of a boy's adventures as he floats down the Mississippi on a raft. Huckleberry Finn is considered his best book. Late in life, Twain lived mainly in Europe with his family. He died in Reading, Connecticut on April the 21st, 1910. So these are the names of Mark Twain's most famous books, and the notable among them are The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, Life on the Mississippi, Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, and Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. So, we are going to study the adventures of Huckleberry Finn today, but first, I would like you to have a look at the house of Mark Twain, which has been now converted into a museum. You may go to this site, marktwainhouse.org, and you can have a virtual tour of this house to understand how he lived and where he wrote his novels. Mark Twain is considered one of American nation's defining cultural figures. And this house is a treasure trove about Twain's life and works. As you can see, the lavish house which he built so painstakingly and which was his favorite, and he wrote so many books here. So today we are going to study Huckleberry Finn. Huckleberry Finn was introduced first in the earlier book, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, and it is one of the most enduring and beloved books in American literature. It was published in 1884, and this has been narrated by Huckleberry Finn, a youngster whose artless vernacular speech is admirably adopted to detailed and poetic descriptions of scenes and narrative renditions that are both broadly comic and subtly ironic. Huck runs away from his abusive father, Pap, and with Jim, the runaway slave, as a companion, begins a long and frequently interrupted voyage down the Mississippi River on a raft. During the journey, Huck encounters a variety of characters, and the story memorably portrays almost every type of person living on or along the river. As a result of these experiences, Huck overcomes conventional racial prejudices and learns to respect and love Jim. The book's pages are dotted with idyllic descriptions of the great Mississippi River and the surrounding forests, and Huck's good nature and unconscious humor permeate the whole. But a thread that runs through adventure after adventure is that of human cruelty, which shows itself both in the acts of individuals and in their unthinking acceptance of such institutions as slavery. The natural goodness of Huck is continually contrasted with the effects of a corrupt society. Harriet Beecher Stowe's novel Uncle Tom's Cabin portrayed the lives of the slaves and their owners, how slavery operated as a business, how the slaves were bought and sold, and how they were separated from their families. The novel, with its tremendous success, was instrumental in changing the public perception on slavery. This particular story focuses on Huck and Jim's journey down the Mississippi River. But in order to understand the story better, we have to know about the historical context of the story. This story is set in pre Civil War days, though it was written 2 decades after the war ended. The novel offers a portrait of typical attitudes towards slavery and demonstrates how the latent racism that existed in pre Civil War times did not change with the war. The American Civil War was a civil war in the United States from 1861 to 1865, fought between the northern United States, loyal to the Union, and the southern United States that had separated from the Union and formed the Confederacy. The Civil War began in April 1861, primarily as a result of the long standing controversy over the enslavement of black people shortly after Abraham Lincoln had taken charge as the President of the United States. The American Civil War was a major event in US history, which lasted from April the 12th, 1861 to May the 9th, 1865. It saw an armed conflict between the Union, which proclaimed loyalty to the US Constitution, and the 11 southern states that separated from the Union and formed the Confederate States of America. The 23 northern states were far superior than the southern states in terms of manpower and arms production. However, the South had tremendous wealth and influence as it was the primary cotton supplier of the world. Here you can see the picture of Abraham Lincoln and Jefferson Davis, commander in chiefs of the rival Union and Confederate camps. So at the beginning of Civil War, there were 23 northern states with 21 million people as compared with some 9 million in the south, of whom about 4 million were slaves. This intense war left between 6 lakh 20,000 and 7 lakh 50,000 people dead. The war claimed close to 50% more American lives than the Second World War and 5 to 6 times more lives than the First World War. The Civil War remains one of the deadliest military conflict in American history. It effectively ended on April the 9th, 1865. The Confederacy collapsed, slavery was abolished, and about 4 million black slaves were freed. At the end of Civil War, Confederates gained control of southern legislatures and instituted the Black Codes. These codes forced African Americans, or Negroes as they were called then, to accept poor work conditions, limited their movement within communities, and denied them basic rights. As you can see in this graphic, in 1861, there were 15 slave states and 19 free states. So the states whose name has been printed in blue, they were free states, and the pink ones are the slave states. To free the slaves, the Emancipation Proclamation came into effect on the historic day of January 1st, 1863, legally freeing millions of slaves. This proclamation was proclaimed by Abraham Lincoln. So when now we know the historical context of Huckleberry Finn, let us see some key facts about this novel. This novel was written at Hartford, Connecticut, and Quarry Farm, located in Elmira, New York. It was published in 1884 in England, and in USA it was published in 1885. The social realism or reconstruction era in United States is the literary period. Genre is children's novel or satirical novel. We shall discuss about it more. Setting is on and around the Mississippi River in the American South. The climax is Jim is sold back into bondage by the Duke and King. Antagonist is Pap, the Duke and King, and society in general. Point of view is first person limited from Huck Finn's perspective. A very interesting notice is printed on the first page of The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, Tom Sawyer's Comrade. Uh, just notices persons attempting to find a motive in this narrative will be prosecuted. Persons attempting to find a moral in it will be banished. Persons attempting to find a plot in it will be shot by order of the author. And the explanatory note explains the kinds of dialects which have been used. And in order to understand the novel fully, one should be able to understand the meanings and the connotations of the words used in this dialect. So, this novel consists of 43 chapters. Here, Huck Finn in the first chapter introduces himself as someone readers might have heard of in the past from his last adventure with Tom Sawyer, and that the widow Douglas and her sister, Miss Watson, have taken Huck into their home in order to try and teach proper manners, to civilize. Instead of obeying his guardians, however, Huck sneaks out of the house at night to join Tom Sawyer's gang, pretending to be robbers and pirates. Huck discovers that his father, Pap Finn, with a history of violence and drunkenness, has returned to town. His father confronts Huck and warns him to quit school and stop trying to better himself. Huck continues to attend school just to spite Pap. Angered at this, Pap kidnaps him and takes him across the Mississippi River to a small cabin on the Illinois shore. Although Huck is happy with his life, free from religion and school, his father beats him so severely that Huck fakes his own murder and escapes down the Mississippi. He lands a few miles down at Jackson's Island, and there he meets Miss Watson's slave, Jim, who has run away for fear he will be sold down the river. Huck and Jim soon learn that men are coming to search Jackson's Island, and the two escape down the river on a raft. Jim's plan is to reach the Free States. The plan troubles Huck and his conscience. Still, Huck continues to stay with Jim as they travel, despite feeling that he is breaking all the laws of society and religion. Huck's struggle with the concept of slavery and Jim's freedom continues throughout the novel. This you can see is a fictitious representation of the Mississippi River and the Jackson's Island and some of the places which have been described in the novel. So, Huck and Jim encounter several characters during their escape, including a gang of robbers aboard a steamboat and two southern families involved in a bloody feud. The only time that Huck and Jim feel that they are truly free is when they are aboard the raft. This freedom and tranquility are ruined by the arrival of the Duke and the King, who take control of the raft and force Huck and Jim to stop at various river towns in order to scam the people. The scams are harmless until the Duke and the King plot to steal a family's entire property. Their plan fails, and in the subsequent confusion, Huck and Jim escape and are soon joined by the Duke and the King. As you can see, this representation is about the failed attempt of Duke and King and their escape from the town. Disappointed at their lack of money, the Duke and the King betray Huck and Jim and sell Jim back into slavery. In his efforts to find Jim, Huck discovers that Jim is being held captive on the farm of Silas and Sally Phelps, who are uncle and aunt of his friend Tom Sawyer. Huck pretends to be their nephew, Tom Sawyer. Suddenly, the original Tom Sawyer arrives, and after Huck explains Jim's captivity, Tom takes on the guise of his own brother, Sid. After dismissing Huck's simple and practical method of escape, Tom makes an elaborate plan of escape for Jim. Tom's plan is based on several of the adventure novels he has read, and the simple act of freeing Jim becomes a complicated travesty with rope ladders, snakes, and mysterious messages. As you can see, this figure particularly depicts Phillips Farms and the river Mississippi. When the escape finally takes place, a pursuing farmer shoots Tom in the calf. Because Jim was unwilling to leave the injured Tom, Jim is again recaptured and taken back to the Phelps farm. At the farm, Tom reveals the entire scheme to his real aunt, Sally, and Uncle Silas. We learn that Miss Watson has passed away and freed Jim in her will, and that Tom was aware of Jim's freedom the entire time. At the end of the novel, Jim is finally set free, and Huck ponders his next adventure away from civilization. So, this is uh, Mississippi River and the states surrounding the river. The free states are where the green star is there, and the slave states are where the red star is there. So this is the diagram of Mississippi River and their escape route. So in this presentation, we have gone through the summary and the historical context. In the next presentation, we shall study the characters, themes, controversy surrounding this novel, probable questions. So these are some of the resources which you may go through while studying this novel, and I hope you have understood a little of the historical context and the summary of this novel. Thank you.